focused on cloud and co-location, data center industry trends, and dynamic market.
Good morning, everyone. It's Dan Scarborough here with Data Center Hawk. Very excited today. I'm joined by Tor Christian Geiland, who is the CEO of Green Mountain. Hi, Tor. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Dan, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm happy to join you today. And
very excited. So, Tor, I'm hoping that a lot of people that are going to be listening will have heard of Green Mountain. Maybe a few will have heard of yourself as well. But for those who don't know who Green Mountain are and don't know who you are, could you just give a brief introduction, please, for me?
I'll start with Green Mountain. We're founded in 2010, founded by a family office that has its base in Stavanger, Norway. A family office called Smedvig. They have a history going back to 1915, more than 100 years, and they've been into quite a lot of different industries in Norway. One of the perhaps most famous industries that they went into is that when the Americans found the oil in the North Sea, Smedvig was the first Norwegian company with oil rigs in the North Sea. They went out of that business in 2006, and some of the equity they got from the oil rig business were invested in different areas. One of them was a fund that had an owner position, or was the owner of Data4 in Paris. So they started to follow the data center business and saw huge advantages of doing data centers in Norway with the green renewable power production, low power price. We'll probably get into that further. So they had some plans of doing something within data center. And during those times, there was announced that a former NATO ammunition storage facility just outside Stavanger was for sale. It's a facility that consists of 6 mountain halls with a total footprint of just above 22,000 square meters. And they saw that one was unique for building a data center and ended up acquiring that. And that's the start of Green Mountain. Myself, I joined the company in 2011 as the second employee. Almost 10 years. I've almost been here in 10 years. Started as the COO. Also had the CTO role. I started before we had a data center, before we had customers. So I've been more or less involved in building the data centers, building the operation. And I took over as CEO in September 2017.
Cool, very interesting. So just going on to kind of your footprint, if you like, and I know you mentioned the main site in the mountain, hence the name. But can you just give me a view of the kind of megawatt of IT load that you've got access to, you've currently built, and whether you've got any other locations in Norway other than the main site?
As I said, it started in Stavanger. We went in operation with our first customers in May 2013. One of the first customers we signed in Stavanger challenged us to build a second site in Norway. So we ended up opening a year later in May 2014 in Telemark, Rjukan, Telemark. So we developed those 2 sites into some quite unique sites. We had quite a good growth on those. But the main growth happened, I would say, 3 years ago, where the interest of international clients to Norway increased dramatically, and we have since early 2018 more than 4 times the revenue as we had then. And one of the customers that we had in our Stavanger facility also challenged us to do something in the Oslo region. So we ended up acquiring a site, and we opened our first data center in Oslo late last year. So today we have 3 sites fully operational. We've sold just below 25 megawatt of IT capacity, and it's growing fast. On these 3 sites, we have access and have agreements for a capacity up to 140 megawatts, meaning that we could still continue to develop these sites for quite some time. But due to the tremendous interest in the data centers in Norway, we've also worked to secure additional sites. And we have one that we're calling DC4 Kalberg, that's just south of Stavanger, where the national grid suppliers are building a new substation, which will be the regional substation, and where you will have a more or less unlimited access to power. So we currently have secured an agreement where we could start to build at that locations as well. And we've said that we could build up to 500 megawatts at that site. I don't think we will do that alone, but it's also a good site for other perhaps potential customers building themselves, or some of our competitors also building there. I think it's a unique site to grow further. In addition to that, we're also secured an option for a site just north of Stavanger, so that we now have 3 sites on the west coast of Norway, as we see quite a lot of interest for customer seeing building a 3-site solution with close vicinity, so you can more or less run synchronous on your IT operation.
Yeah, the availability zones.
Yes.
So just on that, and just to kind of give it a bit of perspective, what are you seeing from a demand perspective in terms of megawatts, or what do you see that annual absorption being? How do you see that kind of capacity forecasting out for the next couple of years?
If you put it,
not to tempt fate or anything, but just what's your kind of view on growth in the Norwegian market? If
you put it a little bit in perspective, if you see the advantages Norway have, if you do the ESG agenda first on sustainability, Norway has 100% renewable power production. If you look at the best flat D city, it's on 35%, meaning that there is quite a lot of challenges with getting access to green renewable power. And you also see that in quite a lot of these cities, there are being restrictions on the growth. Frankfurt just announced that they are more or less limiting the growth path of data centers, meaning that it's not that easy to get capacity as it was. If you then add on with a cost of power, Norway is 75% cheaper than the flat D cities, meaning that there is tremendous amounts of money to save on actually moving your data centers from the flat D cities to Norway. We've done calculations on power alone. If you have a 10 megawatt facility, you're saving 155 million euros during that 10 years period of moving your data centers to Norway. So you get the green and renewable and are able to meet your sustainability goals, and you're saving a tremendous amount of money. Those things together have generated a tremendous interest from European enterprises, other players as well, to actually build the data center in Norway. And there is one other important element, and that is connectivity. In order to locate your data center in Norway, you have to be able to transport your data signals with low latency to where the users are. And due to the investments that has been done out of Norway over the last 3 to 4 years, today we're able to reach 54% of all businesses in Europe with less than 20 milliseconds of round trip.
Which is crazy, isn't it?
And as well, when listening to the experts saying that with 20 milliseconds of round trip, you could move close to 90% of your workload.
Does that include the new cable that's landing in Stavanger, or is that pre that cable or post that cable?
It's currently a little bit both, because there has been new cables established. There was a new cable going to the northern part of Denmark. That's already in operation.
Right.
There is a cable out of Kristiansand, a couple of new cables going out of Kristiansand. We have the new cable going to Newcastle. That one is actually, I have the ship arriving here at my data center next Saturday.
Oh, do you really? How exciting!
Yeah. So they will start the laying of that cable next Saturday, meaning that it's in operation by the end of this year.
So when that cable is in operation, will that change the latency? Will that improve the latency at all to the region?
It will improve the resilience, because we already today have fiber going out through the North Sea, and so we already have those latency numbers today, but that cable will also improve the capacity and the resilience. But we are already today able to reach 54% of European companies with less than 20 milliseconds round trip.
So if you look at kind of your pipeline and not, or inquiries, let's put it at inquiries, not pipeline, how many are we at? Hundreds of megawatts of inquiries? Are you, where are you at? What is that demand? What is that interest level like? Or what are you seeing from an IT megawatt demand perspective?
You're at 100 plus megawatts.
100 plus.
And
That's
what
exciting.
we see as well, the size of the cases is increasing as well, going from a couple of years ago where you have mainly the enterprises, a half a megawatt or just below and above. Today we see multiple megawatts per customers as well.
Because we're digressing a little bit, but I think it's interesting. So if you look at the Scandinavian market, kind of the next question that I'm coming on to, the Nordics to me are quite different to a conventional flapped market, right? Because they're more national markets than city-wide markets, right? But I haven't, from what I understand, the hyperscalers, which we all know and love or hate, depending on who you are, they haven't yet built. There's not a hyperscale data center self-build in Norway yet, is there? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you see that coming? Do you see a hyperscale kind of data center being built in Norway, being a self-build, or is that something that
I expect not only one, I expect more to come as well due to the advantages. If you look at the Nordics in particular and see the difference between those countries, you go to Sweden where you today have power limitation in the Stockholm region due to the main power producing areas in Sweden is in the northern part of Sweden, and there isn't transport capacity from the northern part to the southern part, meaning that you have limitations in the Stockholm region. Sweden also have 40% of their power production within nuclear, which they have a plan of going away from, and doing that they have to building a huge amount of wind today to be able to make that change from nuclear to a green renewable production. But that creates limitations, and it's publicly known that building a large site in Sweden is a challenge. You've also seen announcements from some of the hyperscalers that they have abandoned plans of doing something in Sweden. If you go to Denmark, it's quite an interesting. If you look at the amount of power being produced in Denmark versus Norway, so Norway is producing 5 times the amount of power as Denmark. So Denmark is today relying on quite a lot of import. They had a reduction in their carbon goals. They were actually consuming more carbon if you compare to 2018, 2019, due to the growth in capacity in Denmark. So today there is challenges of getting power in Denmark to make those large hyperscale builds. You could build a domestic data center to support the domestic workload, but if you're challenging the international, the European workload, Denmark isn't the best location. But Norway is. We have a surplus of power today, 5 times the amount of power as Denmark has, and it's also estimated that the power production in Norway will increase by 6% annually for the next 10 years. And due to the amount of power increasing over the next 6 years, estimates that we have done says that the power price will actually be reduced over the next 10 years versus the opposite in Denmark. If you look at the forward prices 5 years ahead of us, it's estimated that Sweden will be the double of the price of Norway. So yeah.
And what about Finland? Because I know that one of the big five have got quite a lot of capacity in Finland. How do you compare to the Finnish market?
I would say Finland is also a country, but what I've seen is that Finland is doing quite a lot of domestic workload and also workload going east. But it's all about distance. How close are you to the actual users? In Sweden, there's been a lot of development in the northern part of Sweden. But if you draw a line from Paris to the northern part of Sweden, our Stavanger facilities are in the middle, meaning that the latencies are far lower, and you're able to actually move quite a lot of additional workload to Norway, the southern part of Norway, than you're able to move to both Finland and the northern part of Sweden.
Yeah, it was interesting. I saw the other day that the northern part of Sweden, they've just accepted a big steel production facility as well, which I think is taking 2 gigawatts of power up there. So I don't believe there are going to be any more data centers going up there for a little while, from what I understand.
But the thing is, the northern part of Sweden is quite equal to Norway. There is a surplus of power, and you could also produce more power. When talking to the power companies these days, if you look at 2020 isolated, it was raining a lot. I would say maybe due to climate changes. We see that in Norway with a lot of more rain, but that gets by more rain, we get more water up in the water reservoirs used to produce power. So during last year, the power companies didn't have consumers for the power they were able to produce. So they had to let the water flow over the dams and not producing power of it. And we actually have 3 times last year where we have negative power pricing, meaning that we were paid to use power.
One of the so on the power side, and just two kind of questions on that front. So I understand that you're in a one of the lowest regions in Europe, but it's quite difficult to forecast because it's hydro on a pricing perspective, right? So depending, I think if it's Q4 and Q1, the prices are generally higher than Q2 and Q3 because there's more demand, right? So do you fix all your power costs forward looking, or do you run a spot rate? How do you see that as the power procurement? And then the second question is, I know there's availability of power, right? But the transformers and the ability to get that power onto a site, from what I understand, that's quite challenging, and there aren't always enough transformers available to actually deliver that power to the customer. What are your comments on those two things?
Let's start with the power pricing. It's correct that the power price is quite different during winter and summer. Summer is don't have a lot of consumption. A lot of the heating in Norway is based upon electric power. So during winter the consumption is high and the power prices are higher. But we're more or less, when we're out marketing Norway, we do the 12-month average, or today, now we're talking about the average price of 2020. And the average price of 2020 was 2.2 euro cent per kilowatt hour. Okay. But it was lower during summer and higher during the winter, but the average price throughout the whole year. So that's what we're talking about, but it varies. And you could fix your price. You could do it 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year hedge on the power price, and you will get it more or less on the price that's today. Or you could be open in the spot market. We have some customers that have a fixed price. When we're comparing what they're paying for power and the other customers that's on the spot market, we see there are savings on being in the spot market. There have been that since we started, but that could change. So we could offer both models on power, and And you could as well buy it on a 5 or 10 years perspective, meaning that you're able to more or less secure your cost base on quite a long way forward.
And then what about on the transformer side of things?
That is, I would say, it's a challenge in Norway. We have a surplus of power. If you look at the national grid, there is a surplus of power. If you go to the regional grid and the local grid, there's been perhaps a little bit of undevelopment in those area of the grids, meaning that you could face challenges of getting power in quite a lot of areas. But that's what we're using our knowledge when we're doing site selections. When we ended up in Oslo, which we opened last year, we used almost a year to identify different locations. We were looking on the vicinity to the Oslo city, the fiber infrastructure, but the most important one was the availability of power. So we decided to go with one site that we were able to build over time. We had access to power enough for the next 3 to 4 years. And we've started a process with the government where we will build our own transformers going from 132 kilovolt down to 22, meaning that we, in 3 to 4 years, have more or less unlimited capacity, but we have signed an agreement with a grid supplier, the grid company, that we have access to 75 megawatt in Oslo. Okay. So we have to use our knowledge to more or less overcome those challenges that's with the grid in Norway. If you look at the fourth site, the Kalberg site, that one is located less than 1,000 meters from where Statnett, the national grid suppliers, is building their new regional substation, meaning that we're close to where the main connection points of power is and where the surplus of power is really, really good. And the cost of building those lines and transformers is really, really low compared to other places. So we're using our knowledge to identify and get agreements on location that has a huge growth potential.
Okay, so listen, I know that this isn't necessarily your business per se, but I've seen a huge increase in mining requirements for Norway, like blockchain, crypto mining. Now, I know from when we spoke before, they're not services that you deliver, but I suppose there's a couple of questions. So Norway didn't accept mining in the country for a while, right? Could you just maybe give us your take on the mining sector in Norway and the Norwegian government perspective on it? And then more importantly, is that going to compromise the availability for other data centers with these, huge amounts of capacity that are coming in or potentially coming in from China and the like from a mining perspective?
If first to the point where Norway didn't accept mining, that's not true. Norway accepted mining, but there is a tax relief on power for power intensive industry. As Norway has a surplus of power and have had that for decades, I would say the industrial heritage of Norway is using power intensive industries because we have a lot of power. So for that reason, the power intensive industry have had a tax reduction of 97% on buying power. Data centers were also defined as power intensive industry back in 2018, meaning that we're also getting that tax reduction, and it's been like that for decades. The discussion in Norway was that the mining companies also defined themselves as data centers, and they were also granted the same tax reduction, and that created some debate in Norway. But it ended up with saying a data center is a data center. You'll get a tax reduction if you're either doing mining or like we are doing professional co-location. And you're getting access to really low cost of power. And that makes Norway an interesting country also for mining. I had a dialogue with with one mining company. We've had a lot of interest. We had if you go back a year, I would say we have two people calling every day to ask for capacity. And I had a dialogue with one the other day here that they were planning to build 1 terawatt in Norway. And they were looking for locations, and they were having a little bit of the same challenges as we've had in the 10 years we've been, that it's not easy to identify a location where you have that power available.
Yeah.
Without investing quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we have those sites, and we have agreement on those sites, and we could continue to grow. And those crypto mining companies, that they have to more or less do the same job as we've done over the last decades. But there's huge interest. And is it good? Is it bad? Is it a data center? I would say it's a building that has a lot of power, and you're opening the windows and putting in fans. Is that a data center or not? I would say,
debate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think my take on it is that, you know, if you've got mining in a renewable location like Norway, and that's removing mining from, you know, a non-renewable location like China, right? Then the net effect on sustainability is a positive effect. Right. I also think that there's an ability for mining to be proactively used as a form of underwriting renewable energy generation in other locations as well. So I'm not an advocate, but I'm not, you know, I think it's had a bad press to a certain extent, and I think there is a role for it to play within this sector. So just moving on. So you're, as you said earlier, you used to be the CTO of the business. And, you know, one of my key interests is the sustainable development side of things. You know, can you just take me through how you're designing your sites? I know you run at least one of them is 100% on renewable power, not renewable power, cooling from the fjord, right? Sorry, my brain's not working completely. But can you just take us through how you're designing your sites and how you're optimizing the build from a sustainability perspective, and whether you've been looking at any innovative energy and engineering solutions to increase the performance?
Yeah, first of all, what I'm only saying that Norway is, in addition to having cheap power, all green and renewable, it's also cold and wet. And living in it is not the best. That's why we all travel to the Mediterranean every summer. But for operating data center, Norway is ideal. We have a cold and wet climate. The average temperature is low, and you're able to build really energy efficient solutions. And being the CTO of the company, I was involved in building the quite unique cooling solution we have at our DC1 Stavanger facility, where we are collecting water from a depth of 100 meters. And the water temperature at that depth is constant 8 degrees the whole year round. So what we've done is quite unique. We've blasted a basin on shore, but the bottom of that basin is 5 meters below the sea level. And we connected a pipe at the bottom of the basin down to 100 meters, and water automatically flows into the basin and keeps the same level as the sea on the outside. So we have tidal movement on the basin inside the cooling station. So when we're pumping that water through the heat exchangers, water are automatically being fed in due to gravity into the cooling station. So that solution is one of the most energy efficient solutions worldwide on cooling. We have partial PUE in cooling equal to 0. Because we don't have any active components. So that's something you could do in Norway with access to cold water. But then we're doing in the Oslo facility, we're using indirect air-to-air with an adiabatic solution. It's raining a lot in Norway, so we have quite good access to water. And water is not a limitation in Norway at all. And by doing those solutions, we're really energy efficient during the winter. And it's a little bit lower during the summer, but overall, we are on PUEs below 1.2, and depending on the efficiency or the capacity per rack the customers are running, we also see numbers below 1.15. So really energy efficient, but that's mainly based on the cold and wet climate we have in Norway. And we, being in the business for 10 years, we have a lot of knowledge on how to utilize that let's say, cold and wet climate in a way to make our customers energy efficient.
So are you running diesel gen sets, or are you looking at kind of hydrogen fuel cells? You know, are you finding immersion cooling, or, you know, what are you from another outside of your kind of geographical location and the benefits you've got from there? Are you making any steps at an engineering level to kind of push barriers at all?
Our motto is setting the green standard, and by saying that, we have to more or less look for what's next in our business in order to be even more sustainable, more energy efficient in a lot of ways. So we don't, when it comes to fuel cells, we don't have anything in operation yet, but we have a project actually in our DC2 Telemark site. The reason for being there is that there is a hydrogen production facility just a kilometer from the site, meaning that we have access to hydrogen in nearby. That hydrogen is also produced with green renewable power. And the reason for doing that is that we want to innovate. We want to assist in the innovation on going away from fuel cells, from diesel generators and into fuel cells as the backup generator. We're not there yet. It's not a product or a solution that's in a way that it could be commonly used in all data centers, but someone have to take the responsibility of using them, innovating on them, and getting the necessary knowledge in order to make that technology available for everyone. So we want to be that player setting the green standard. And we're also involved in a couple of other interesting projects where we have a company here in Stavanger that's doing onshore lobster farming. They are in the final stage of getting the necessary approvals to build a lobster farm at their DC1 facility.
Oh.
And the, let's say, the challenge with being able to reuse the heat, the waste heat of a data center, is that it's a low grade heat. So if you're using the waste heat of a data center into a district heating facility, you have to increase the water temperature. We're extracting water at 18 to 20 degrees, and you have to lift it to 60 plus to put it on a district heating facility, meaning that you're losing some of the advantages of actually doing that. But doing lobster farming, onshore lobster farming, the ideal temperature for lobster farming is 19 degrees.
I'm coming for lunch, Tor. I'm coming for lunch.
So we've been working and identifying and seeking solution that could actually reuse the waste water of our DC1 facility in a better way than building a lot of other infrastructure, or more or less a greenwashing project, where we're using the water in a way that's saving that lobster farm a tremendous amount of money in energy to warm the water. So we're taking the water directly from the cooling station into the lobster farm, I was saying we should get paid in lobster, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there. I will be there. So just last question on the technology. We've only got a couple more questions, but on the technology side of things, one of the things that I'm quite interested in is how you connect the compute all the way down through the BMS, and how you manage the reporting and the controls and all of that side of things, using, you know, IoT, and take the data that you're generating and use that as a way of aggregating and analyzing and managing your assets better. You know, where are you at with that side of things? Is that something that you're currently doing, or is that an area of improvement that you could improve upon, or what's your thoughts on that?
I would say we're one of the best in class on that, and we have also been awarded with quite a lot of awards for our solutions. And the history is when I started in 2011, we were more or less looking into the DCIM systems of the different vendors. Ended up with I'll not say the name of it, but one supplier's DCIM system. We installed it. The license cost was high, the limitations was quite huge, and it ended up with us more or less building solutions around it to give it the necessary data we needed. So I started the project in 2014, where I engaged a couple of developers and said, I want to build my own DCIM system on top of my BMS system, where I would have it like this. So it's more or less collecting the data and presenting it in a good way. That's what it's all about, and also using AI on the data in a way to predict if things should fail. So we ended up with developer used a little bit more than a year to develop our own system. It's called Green Peak, where it consists of a solution that gives our customers a web portal where they can log onto and see their stats of their specific data centers in real time. They can see the PUE, the power consumption down to a rec level, temperature down to a rec level. They can see the carbon emission on their data centers in real time. We do all the power invoicing from that solution. We're collecting the spot market price hourly from the trade organization, and calculating the consumption, the PUE, and so we're more or less automated the process fully, and it's not something that you're able to buy today out of a shelf. It's something that we have developed, and it's built on a multi-customer solution. So we currently have all our customers with their specific portal getting access to all of these data, and we could compare. I could be in a meeting with one customer, and I see their average PUE of the last 6 months is 3% higher than the customer in the next room, and I could say to them, you know that you're not the most energy efficient customers, and if you do that, and that, you could improve your energy efficiency by that amount of percent, and you could also save a lot of money. So being able to use this solution in such a way, it gives tremendous advantages for us to be able to have full control, and it's also one of the reasons for us having 100% uptime since day one. We haven't had any failures, any SLA breaches on our customers. And the reason for that is what we say, total control. Is AI. We have a lot of sensors monitoring everything, but then doing the AI on it and also presenting it in a way that you're able to read the status of the data center. So we're quite mature and have done a lot, and it's all self-built based upon our specifications.
That's interesting. So last two questions. So there's been a lot of talk about the industry shifting to zero carbon, right? And I can see that you're clearly, on the way. And I say that because I'm talking about embedded carbon, scope 3 emissions, etc. But do you think it's realistic that this industry can become zero carbon? And if you talk about some of the innovations that you've mentioned, are you collaborating at an industry level with other operators outside of Norway to help improve what they're doing? How's that? What's your take on that?
I think the data center business is growing, and some of that capacity has to be in countries where the challenge with getting access to green renewable power is huge. So based upon that, I would say we will still over the next decades face challenges with achieving those goals. But I think we have to first of all look at countries like Norway, who has access to surplus of power and it's green and renewable, and maybe move some of the workload to a location like that instead of transporting the power, which you have quite tremendous loss on power when transporting it. You're building fiber cables and transport the data without any loss. I think that's one of the solutions to more or less go and face your targets. But it is a challenge, and I would say Norway as a country is currently, there was an announcement today that they started to build a new power cable to Germany to be part of the European grid. meaning that if there is a surplus of power in Germany, if it's blowing a lot and there is a surplus of wind power, Norway could import that power and actually reverse their hydropower generators and pump water back up in the reservoirs. And then when there is a lack of power in Germany, you could then use that water that you've stored and route the power back to Germany. So Norway could be a battery for Europe. And I would say we have to cooperate far better. We have to use our advantages within Europe and not think like we have borders, but think like we have a common goal of achieving the ESG goals that we have set. And moving power is one way, because data still have to be in Germany. You cannot move everything to Germany, but what could be moved should be moved. Is our take.
Okay, last question for you. What's next for you guys? I'm assuming, I was going to ask this, but I'm assuming that there aren't any plans to expand outside of Norway. It sounds like your business is very focused on the benefits of Norway. Are you planning on going outside of Norway, or what's the plans for Green Mountain?
You have to look a little bit on the different type of workloads, because we think today that Norway is unique for European workload that could reside out of its own country. But we are getting challenged by customers who has a need in a specific region, a specific area, and a specific city. So we have had plans of doing something in Denmark. Those were a little bit put on pause, but it will probably be reinitiated later this year. So I think, and I believe, and I'm pretty sure that we will continue to grow, I think mostly in Norway, but we will as well get a footprint in different regions in the Nordics and Europe as well, but mainly to support the domestic workload that cannot be moved out of Norway. And by doing it together with customers that's moving their majority to Norway, but still needs to have some left in their home country, and building capacity to be able to handle that.
Awesome. Tor, thank you so much. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed this as much as I have, and look forward to catching up with you on your journey, maybe in a year's time.
It's been a pleasure to speaking to you, Dan, and yes, we'll join up again.
Yeah, thank you very much.